Hello, this is Colorado Department of Agriculture, Hollis Glen. We're signing on. Can anyone out there hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. We'll be starting here in just a few minutes. You can put your lines on mute, and if you are logging onto the website, as well as calling in, make sure you put your computer on mute if you're going to listen through the telephone, otherwise you'll get bad feedback. So, otherwise we'll be starting here in a minute. Thank you very much.
Like that, for instance.
That's so one thing you'll want to do is you'll see on your that sound we're hearing is someone's computer, and you want to put the mute button on your screen. It's a red circle button at the bottom center of your computer.
So if the old berries or fresh berries, it shows you how that affects. Yeah, and
There you go.
our website is, I tell people the easiest way to find it is CSU. So just Google that, you'll find it. We also have
What's ABM software?
active systems.
Oh, ABM. Okay.
You brought
We have you retain them. Well, I haven't.
Gave up drinking about 20 years ago.
Oh, yeah, I have a bottle of wine sitting in my truck.
It's still available for you as a choice later. See?
Exactly. After work's done.
We haven't done all of our skills. I think we're probably the best we can do for all of our.
I heard all of them.
Yeah, if you didn't get paid all of it.
I think I might need a few of those pages.
Which is good from one standpoint.
Hi, this is Hollis Glen with the Colorado Department of Agriculture. We'll be starting here in just a few minutes. We're all taking our seats.
I just went first.
Did you get my email? Like, I think it was after our first meeting. And I emailed you and I emailed you and other guy. The one.
Very big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you ready to
And
go?
so I sent you guys.
I can't admit people.
That's fine. Just a minute. How many people are so far
I already
online?
got back. You had brought it back too.
16.
I want you guys to look at that.
Can you then get now onto our?
Yeah, but if somebody tries to get in, I gotta leave it to the middle.
Okay. I have 2 more minutes.
That was right after the first meeting.
The first meeting that I had to get you and Terry to do some review of it.
So your challenge is you can't project it in and admit people.
But I want to.
We need somebody else.
If not, I'll give it to you now.
So they can the meeting part of Google Meets.
Bacteria in the room synthesize a lot of the amino acids.
It's right in front
So
of
I
me.
can see it being
Hey, Mark.
vulnerable for cat.
Yeah.
Simple animals, swine, poultry, they can't do that. That's where the amino acid profile of the protein source is as important. But if you, I bet that study would probably tell me what
Yeah.
that is. Okay.
Yeah, and I want you to look at that. There's actually 2 or really 3 studies, but that particular one has to do with like morphology or protein and calories.
Yeah.
Greg, we have 15 seats in center.
No, that'd be great. I'm not sure if it's, you know,
Yeah, I would like to.
We get like
I'm not sure
17
what I'm looking at
online.
yet.
What?
We get like 17
But that's
online.
fine.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
And they're like rich guys.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. I just want to get you guys on board
put
with,
those out.
cattle guys.
Sure.
I will.
So in cattle, Veronica, what
Yeah.
the issue would be, we improve protein.
Mm-hmm.
And if indeed, it's what we talked about earlier, which is about 35.
Right.
Still gonna be,
It's not good enough, right?
it'll be sold as a discount. For your. Oh, yes.
Wait, so you'll advance the slides?
Cattle,
Or do we
especially.
have a?
You do, because the ones we have here don't work.
Again, isn't that going to be our video? We have to turn that around.
But I have to, we have to switch documents.
All right.
See if it works.
Or actually, the microphone.
And then when you need to,
Richard.
when you need me to switch documents, I'll.
You just want me to clarify.
Richard.
Hi, Scott.
Good to see you.
Jet lag?
Not bad. More Nashville lag than anything.
Problem is,
Just as a reminder, to provide that, to avoid that feedback, what you're going to want to do is mute your computer, which is a red circle in the bottom center of your screen. Are we good to go?
I believe so.
Are we ready to go? Okay, first of all, good afternoon. Welcome to the Colorado Department of Agriculture. I am Hollis Glenn. I am the Director of the Inspection and Consumer Services Division here at the department. I want to keep my comments brief because I want to save time for the stakeholder discussion. So, but let me first start with thanking every one of you, all the stakeholders, in all the effort and time that you've put into this project. Your comments and responses and insight have really been insightful on this project and help us get to the direction in which we're going. So with that said, what we're going to do today is look at a snapshot of the project and really a snapshot of where the conversation has led so far. And that's done through the documents that we have, which is in the draft report. And the goal today is essentially to look broadly at the direction of the report, quite frankly, and gain consensus among the stakeholders that we are going in the right direction, or this is where we should be heading. So with that said, I'll bring in our project facilitator, Greg Palomo from Government Performance Solutions. In welcoming Greg, I really also want to thank Greg and his staff, Ryan and Kate, for the great job they've done facilitating this project. I think that what they've been able to allow us to do is allow the conversation to very quickly focus on what we should be discussing on this issue. So I want to thank you, Greg, personally, for the great management and help that you've had on this project. So with that, help me welcome and also thank Greg for our project manager. Thank you.
Kind of you, thanks. So, as Hollis said, we want to review the work to date and also share with you a plan to complete the report. It's due by the end of the year, so we want to give you the roadmap to get there. We're going to discuss the draft report content, and that's the right way to phrase it. It's draft report content. It's the first time you all have had a chance to see this, and so we want to give you a bit of time to provide feedback on it. There will be places where there's work left to be done, and we need your help on that, so we'll call that clarifying next steps and owners. Three simple things to do. Hollis?
Just really quick, can we confirm that we can be heard
Probably do that.
in the internet world?
Are you all on the line able to hear us?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Right.
Yes.
Okie doke. Okay,
Very
so
well.
thank you. For those of you who are on the phone, at any point in time when you pipe in, if you would just give us your name as you do so. It's a little bit challenging to know who all's out there. Can't see split screen, unfortunately. So before we get into the meat of the report, and by the way, we've got a couple hours today, and so we want to use the majority of that to actually talk about the content and see where we have consensus, see where we have differences of opinion, and resolve those wherever we can. I'd like to start with introductions in the room, and we'll use this as a way to test whether our pendant kind of remote microphones are working properly. So please, your name, title, and your organization, and a special welcome to those of you who are recent additions. Since the last time we were all together, a number of people have joined the study group. So Veronica, would you get us started?
I'm Veronica with growhempcolorado.com, and I am a hemp farmer.
Scott Zier, Colorado Department of Agriculture, Division of Inspection and Consumer Services.
Robert Silver, I'm a veterinarian, Chief Veterinary Officer for Children's Sciences.
Okay. Quick question. Were you guys able to hear Dr. Rob?
Yes.
Okay, cool. He was the first one by the remote microphone. Okay. David?
David Bush, I'm an attorney with the Hogan Law Group.
Bill Hamrick, I'm the executive officer of the Colorado Livestock Association.
Brent Young, I'm an ag economist with Colorado State University Extension.
Wendy Mosher with New West Genetics. I'm Hunter Buffington. I'm the executive director for the Colorado Hemp Industry Association. Margaret Richardson, Salt Creek Hemp Co. I'm a hemp farmer and sit on the board of Colorado Hemp Industries Association.
Keith Hankins, I'm a vet tech with Twisted Biscuit Company.
Richard Tenai, Association of American Bee Control Officials. I'm the chair of the Ingredient Definitions Committee.
Eric Ford with Colorado Grow Out.
I'm Alice Lang, director here at Department of Agriculture.
Mark Angels, Colorado Department of Agriculture.
Right. Go to Farm Service Agency, Farm Manager. Way to the back. Colorado Department of Ag.
Welcome, Dwayne. Okay. Mark, do you have a picture of who all are on the line? No? Okay. I apologize. This is going to be an invitation to pandemonium, but let's go. Those of you who are on the line. Yeah?
There's a list. We can go ahead and bottom at the end of our slide deck.
Yeah. At the end of the slide deck. Just hit end.
And then we'll
Hit page.
There we go.
Okie doke. Great. So what I guess I'd like to do is start in the upper left. So Mark, if you are on the line, or Richard, just work our way down. Okay.
Bill Bookout, National Animal Supplement Council.
Welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
Bob Church or Charlotte?
Yep. Bob Church of the Montana Department of Agriculture, representing AFCO, the other oilseeds investigator.
Charlotte Conway, FDA Center for Veterinary Medicine.
Carrie, Emily, Kristen?
Kristen Green, University of Kentucky Division of Regulatory Services.
Thanks. Neil, are you on the line?
Yes, Neil Himberger, Ranchway Feeds, Fort Collins, Colorado.
Neil? How about Matt Schweigert? Chris Whitman, I saw you on the line, are you not?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I'm Chris Whitman here, and I am just doing my part, be in the industry, and graduated from Kansas State University in feed science management, and got connections into the feed industry and hemp industry as well. So thanks for having me on this team.
Thanks for coming. Okay, let's go over then to the animal nutrition safety and public health subgroup. And anybody on the line from that, or whose name is listed there?
Megan Davis, Louisiana Department of Ag and Forestry.
Megan?
Amy, Colorado Veterinary Medical Association and Livestock Priesthood. Yep.
Oh, this is Chelsea Kent. I own Heroes Pets and the Food Regulation Tax Alliance.
Anybody else on that list?
Yeah. Yeah, this is Blaine Thompson, Dexter Farms.
Hey, Blaine.
I'm not listed, but this is Neil Alley, High Plains Nutrition.
Thanks for joining, Neil. All right. How about on the Ag Econ team? Anybody on the line from that group or whose name shows up on the right-hand side of this sheet? Going once. All right, we're going to get back into the presentation. Yeah, let me ask. Is there anybody else on the line who we didn't call or didn't introduce?
David Mossman.
Hi, Dennis.
This is Rachel Gilby, Department of Agriculture in North Dakota.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, Terry.
Yep.
Ethan Voorhees.
Hi, Ethan.
If you're on the phone call, please turn down the volume on your computer speakers if you're doing both. Thank you.
Hi, this is David Smith. I'm with the New York State Department of Agriculture.
Hi, David, and welcome.
Corey Skier, New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets.
Corey.
Dave Phillips, North Dakota Department of Ag, Chief Specialist.
Welcome.
This is Rachel Edelstein, Food Safety Inspection Service, USDA, and I can't see I'm just calling in, so I can't see the presentation.
Do you have the documents?
We'll email them.
Rachel, do you have the documents that Scott sent out a couple of days ago?
I don't think I do. I'm calling in for Roberta Wagner because she might be later.
Okay. We're happy to forward that email to you if you'll just give us the email address.
Okay, I'm sorry about this. I was on the phone with an earlier meeting. And I think that was with Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So maybe can I send you my address that way?
Yes. That works.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. We've got about five machines going here to manage this thing.
I just want to ask a question when it's time.
Okay. Anybody else on the horn? All right. Well, I'd ask you all to go on mute. We get a little bit of feedback, as Scott said. So if you put us on mute, we'll do a little bit more introductory work, and then we'll get into the meat of the meeting. Victoria?
Veronica, I just have a quick question about the new people that have come on board. How did that happen, and why is that important?
Why?
Beyond the other regulators. Just wondering about like the new people that have been brought on at the last minute and why that's happened. That is better.
No, that's quite all right. That's quite all right. As you can imagine, we got a number of interested parties who found out about the study, would like to take part. And, we did, at this point, we feel like they had something to contribute and something that, knowing that they're coming in halfway through the process, we had stakeholders that weren't able to make the first meetings that were originally on it. And talking with them, they had good insight and something to share, and we thought we'd include their voice.
And I think it's awesome New York Department of Ag is on.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, we're happy to have New York and as Rachel and who's calling in also for Roberta Wagner from FSIS from USDA as well. So when we're looking for stakeholders to talk about this issue, we definitely want to make sure we include those people and anyone who would want to talk.
So one more plea to those of you on the line. Please put us on mute, because every time we talk, we're hearing ourselves back through your microphone. And I can hear somebody wiggling, so you just moved, it's you. All right, well, we'll go ahead. Okay, so the agenda for the day, we're going to start by describing the process to get us to closure.
Someone muted you. Press star 6 to unmute.
Mercifully. All right, so we're going to describe the process to get us to closure. We're going to recap our decision-making protocol, which we agreed to on the first meeting, and just kind of refresh that. And then we're going to walk through the report, talk to you about the overall report design, and then just go conclusion by conclusion down to the single recommendation and ask whether we have broad consensus, whether you believe that a strong minority opinion exists and you're prepared to document that. And then if you think there are any gaps, we want to understand those and then work with you to close them where possible. Okay? Spend the last few minutes nominating team members to help refine the report. You know, it doesn't take, you can have too many cooks in a particular kitchen, but we do need some folks who have strong writing skills to make sure that this
Anyone
is
in the room
succinct.
can hear you.
Okay.
Hey Megan, this is Bill. I can't hear anything.
All right.
Uh-oh. Oh, because you know why someone muted it on your side?
This is Dave. I can't hear anything.
Someone muted you guys on your side, I think.
Hopefully between the phone call
Yeah.
and all the people popping up online, say, hey, we can't
Yeah.
hear you.
Yep.
We'll
One
miss
second.
us eventually. Thanks.
I'm going to try to send a message. I can figure out how to do it.
Yeah, someone muted your side.
What's the number, Scott?
It is 857.
Your call cannot be completed in silence. Your call cannot be. Your call cannot be completed in silence.
Exit.
857 703 6525 9266.
Welcome. Enter the meeting. You are joining a call with more than 4 people. Please mute your phone.
Hello, sorry, can you hear us? This is the Colorado Department of Agriculture. Sorry about that. Can you hear us?
Can you hear that?
All right, someone must have hit the mute button there.
Mute you button.
Mute button.
All right, I'm gonna just rewind then a couple of minutes. So we'll start off by reviewing our process to get to a final report. Then we're going to recap our decision-making protocol. We're going to work through the report itself, starting with the overall design and then going conclusion by conclusion down to the single recommendation, gauging whether we have consensus. If we have need for a minority opinion, we'd like you to raise your hand and volunteer to author that. And then if you feel like there are gaps that we need to close, we need your to volunteer for that as well. And the folks from the CDA have done a nice job drafting this to date, and so we just probably need a few more people with very specific opinions to fill those gaps. We'll close the meeting nominating anybody else to help refine the language and any other next steps. Clear enough?
Yes, sir.
All right. If you're on the telephone, if you could please mute us. It's quite disturbing in the room. So I'd ask each of you to look for that mute button. All right, so I mentioned we did the plan to close. Here we are. A couple days ago, you got a draft report that was circulated by Scott. We're here on November 17th reviewing that draft report. We've got about 3 weeks until such time the edit requests and minority opinions that we assign today will be due. The department will incorporate those into a near final draft on the 8th. ship that to you. We'll have the final conference call on the 12th and submit the report on the 15th. Okay? So only about 5 weeks before this thing comes to an end, and so a lot of collaboration will be needed. But at least we have some clear deadlines, and so we'll recap those for you right at the very end. But I hope you see how it all fits together. Questions on that? Okie doke. This is a slide we resurrected from the very first meeting. A group like this, there's different ways you can make decisions. You can go minority vote. What we talked about last time was pursuing consensus wherever we have it. And remember, consensus is not full agreement. It's a willingness to proceed and not get in the way of a conclusion or a recommendation. In the place where we have a strong opinion, we'd ask you to raise your hand and author a minority opinion. We'll keep it brief. It's simply a way that we say, look, we had 20-some people on this group and another 20-some people contributing to it. We didn't have full consensus. Here are the places where alternate opinions need to be heard. Okay? Very well. So, I'm going to turn it over to Hollis. He's going to take us through the outline of the rough draft, and then we'll go conclusion by conclusion, capturing places where you think we need edits or where we have gaps.
All right, thanks, Greg. I want to begin kind of working a little bit backwards on how on the structure of the report. And so I first want to just highlight what we're referring to here as Appendix B, the summary of discussion conclusions. I don't necessarily, this is not necessarily going to be the focus of today's conversation, but what this is again, this is a very rough articulation of the talking points from the subgroup stakeholder conversations as we work through the questions that we first identified from the various areas of focus in the subgroups. Kind of what were the dominant conversation or talking points. As with any of kind of stakeholder discussion exercises, really what we're trying to do is provide kind of a synthesis of the discussion and not necessarily a comprehensive detailed blow for blow. This is what I would call the equivalent of kind of, if it's an exercise, sticky notes on a work page. And we have to synthesize this a little bit more to make sure we get the discussion and what we need to say right. We know there are things that need to be cleaned up. We know there's things that there are gaps. And we know that there's things in here that we probably don't want to put in here. So this is a document that we'll be working on that will then ultimately then support the body of the report, which is, again, basically a conclusion. This report is essentially just a reflection of the stakeholder discussion of experts in the room from the various industries. So with this is when we talk about finding volunteers to help kind of synthesize this out, this will be one of the drafts in which we'll be kind of looking to layer in some little extra meat and kind of fine-tune this document. But this document will eventually live in the report as an appendix to capture a little bit more of the detail of the stakeholder discussion. So we wanted to provide it to you so you guys had a chance to review it. You were part of the conversation. If you weren't able to be part of those stakeholder comment groups, you can sort of still see where we're heading and the comments that were made when the stakeholders in their subgroups address the various questions. So we wanted to share this with you, and we're happy to take comments on that, after the meeting. And then the second document we have, which is where we're going to spend a lot of our time, or the remaining bit of our time, with this on this session, is looking at where the conversation has led so far. And this is the actual draft of the report. And essentially, it's two big pieces of the report. A lot of it is not addressed yet. But as I walk through it, basically you have the two big components. Is you have the 2-page executive summary that highlights kind of the situation that we're in regarding potential and limitations of the hemp byproducts and feed, as well as from the stakeholder discussions, the conclusions that we are formulating, and the legislative recommendation, which is the charge of this project from the Colorado State Legislature. I'm working through, for those online, I'm working through the draft report. And after the executive summary, what we'll have is a quick section, section 1, project overview, in which we're going to discuss the scope of the project, the objectives, highlight kind of what our process was that we are working through, so the readers can understand how we got to where we're going. We'll talk about the formulation of the stakeholder groups, the approach to the project, but also constraints and limitations of this project. After all, this is a stakeholder discussion that was done in 4 months, and so we'll talk about the constraints and limitations of this report. It is not necessarily going to be a study. It's definitely not a research report. It's more a report about the discussion. We'll provide some background information specifically on hemp information, and we'll address the Controlled Substance Act, the Farm Bill, just current status of hemp in general in the United States here in Colorado. We'll talk about basics of food regulation, the introduction of AFCO, the Food and Drug Administration, Center for Veterinary Medicine, the approval process. All of that will kind of be lined out for the reader in Section 2. And then we have Section 3, and this is what we provided, and this is what we have synthesized as a result of going over those stakeholder discussions and discussing both in work groups and on the individual interviews. And this will be the conclusions and the recommendations. So this would really be the meat of the report, and then and we will go through that, and this is where we want to focus today. And then after that, we'll have a list of I'm on page 8. Then we'll have the appendices of the report, which would be a list of the stakeholders who participated, appendix, the summary discussions, which is the document I started off with a summary of stakeholder questions, broken into 3 subgroups. Again, subgroup 1, regulatory, subgroup 2, animal health and nutrition, public safety, and subgroup 3, agricultural economics. And then we'll have Appendix C with terms that we're going to want to address that we'll have in the body of the report. There will probably be other things in this report. Again, important thing to take away here is this is still very much a work in progress. And as we synthesize it and fine-tune it, it'll come about. But really what we want to share with you today is, click the button, are the 6 recommendations that, as listening to the conclusions or the conversations, 6 conclusions that we heard the stakeholders say, as well as the legislative recommendation. Again, backing up a little bit, this project is a result of legislation that passed in the Colorado legislature last year, in which the specific charge is to explore the feasibility or possibility of including hemp into animal feed to come up with conclusions and any legislative recommendations. And as we've tried to talk and as we introduced this project before, it really is to identify through discussion with stakeholders what a path forward, if possible, what that looks like, what are the concerns. And in listening to you, what we've developed are 6 conclusions, and this is what we'll be looking for consensus on today, as well as 1 legislative recommendation. The graph that you see, or the graphic that we developed to kind of articulate what we have heard in the discussion and what our conclusions are, is here on the screen, in which basically the conclusions are initially started out to be broad in scope, and then as we go work through them, get more narrow in focus as far as what a path forward would look like, which as we start to layer in terminology, we're using the phrase approval initiative. So if there's going to be an approval initiative for it to become an approved ingredient, i.e. this is the feasible pathway, the approval initiative goes broad and then goes very narrow with conclusion 6, and then it will be supported by a legislative recommendation. So really briefly, and this is what we'll discuss and talk about, are we on the right track? What are we missing? What other points do we need to say? Starting broadly, the stakeholder discussion indicated that first of all, what we need to do is this needs to be done on a federal level. We need to look for federal approval, meaning Colorado should not unilaterally approve hemp as an approved ingredient alone, nor should any other state. That really the issue, because everything crosses state lines, because we are a global market, because of a number of reasons, really the best strategy, starting broadly, is to look for federal approval. Second is to conduct research into the economic viability. This one came out of subgroup C, agricultural economics, in which the conclusion was that its economics of this its specific focus of hemp and feed is important to first understand if we're going to do it and if there is going to be an approval initiative. However, the current research that is out there on them in economics perspective is still, much like kind of on the health side, may still need additional research to answer some of those economic questions. Go ahead, Wendy.
I'm sorry, this is Wendy. Are we allowed to comment right now, or are you going to actually go through?
We're going to go through.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to go through. Right. Third theme that we heard in the conversations is that it really needs to be a collaborative effort. One with among it's not just the industrial hemp industry going to be taking this ball and run with it, and it's definitely not necessarily the regulatory industries running this. But it really needs to be a collaborative effort. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of moving pieces. And quite frankly, there are a lot of people in Colorado and outside of Colorado that are looking into this stuff already, have already began this initiative. And it should be looked to see how can this should be done, and can this, or should this be, or this should be done in a collaborative approach. With the caveat, from what we heard, is that you really are going to need someone who has experience, an experienced consultant, in submitting applications for getting feed ingredients approved. You do need someone kind of that bridge that gap between the industrial hemp industry and the regulatory industry and how to navigate those waters. Getting further narrow in our focus is that there should be the stakeholders conversation suggested that we should target, or petitioners should target a food additive petition. That means essentially that there are a number, as we talked last time, there are a number of pathways in which ingredients can be approved, whether it's through AFCO, self-confirmed GRAS, or through a submission directly to the FDA, Center for Veterinary Medicines, which would be a food additive petition, FAP for short. The consensus in the discussion was that that would be the better option, primarily because of the human safety component that would necessarily require a food additive petition route anyway, so that would be the best one just to go down. And then when we looked at the parts of the plant and what would be feasible, whether it's the whole plant or which parts of the plant, and it was discussed by the stakeholders, and agreement was kind of sort of a theme involved, that the focus for an approval initiative really should be focusing on approval of specifically just the hemp seeds and the hemp seed byproducts, that in other parts of the plant would be problematic, that the low-hanging fruit that we've all kind of sort of said, phrased it that way, would be for an approval specifically for hemp seed byproducts, possibly in different food additive petitions. And then 6 is our conclusion of execute a safe petition process, SAFE, in which when we looked and we listened to the regulatory subgroup and we listened to kind of what is going to be needed as far as guidance into this initiative to be successful, we came up with an acronym SAFE, which is start early conversations. The petitioner should start early conversations with the FDA to ensure that when they go down that road, that everyone, they are on the same page with the FDA, and the FDA is aware of where they're going and can provide assistance to make sure that that application is, steps are followed complete, and they get what they need to make it a proper evaluation. A is assemble the material for a petition, including existing research. F is filling gaps of additional resources. So the petitioners, whether the collaborative petitioners, who that may be, if they go this route, they should, once assemble the application material, including the research, assess that research, and that assessment has probably been started. But there needs to be assessment of the research to identify what particular research is still missing, and fill in those gaps. That's the F, is fill in those gaps with any additional research. And then E is execute a targeted application. So once you've assembled the research, once the petitioners have filled in those gaps with anything else that is missing, they should really then just execute a targeted application that targets specific species, life stages, and other specifics on what they are specifically looking to be for an approval. Now, those are the conclusions that we heard from the stakeholder discussions. Those are what we're looking to say, yeah, we're on the right track. Again, with the charges, we were asked, is there a legislative recommendation? And the legislative recommendation is that the Colorado legislature could support new research and an initiative to submit a food additive application to determine if the safety and efficacy of hemp seed byproducts. Mainly, if research is needed, the legislators, however, can support that research, and then research indicates its safety and efficacy. The legislature then can continue to support the initiative to actually submit that through to get federally approved. Veronica?
I just want to make a note that what it says on the screen is not the same thing it says on the piece of paper right here that you guys printed out. Actually, what it says on the paper seems more right than the screen.
Okay.
You actually have hemp seed byproducts on the screen, and on the paper it shows hemp byproducts, which does sound correct.
Okay.
So I didn't know.
Draft iterations and
so which one is it?
We can figure out. Well, I would say it's hemp seed and hemp seed byproducts. Yes.
Okay.
Right. Is
Well, I think seed should be removed because I think aren't we recommending to legislation to support us in further initiatives regarding hemp and its byproducts? Or are you only talking about the?
I would think that in this case, because we are talking narrow and particularly with conclusion 5, that we are focusing on hemp seeds.
Okay.
That initiative, that is a very first step initiative that the legislative recommendation should also be that narrow and focused. And we can semantics that, and we are playing with this stuff. Is pretty fluid, but we can tease that out. But I think it should say specifically hemp seed, whole hemp seed, and hemp seed byproducts.
Well, where are you justified in that support of new research and initiatives? Like, why do we need more research? How do we determine that the research already existing isn't enough?
What we're saying is that needs to be that is that's in focus. In conclusion 6, in the safe petition, that assemblage and then review, that needs to happen. Now, if there is no research, then fine. But if the petitioning group can determine that. But what we're saying is, we don't know from a perspective of the facilitators here, assemble research and determine if there is gaps to be filled.
Well, and I thought that we were going to recommend that the legislation supports the industry's research and development on other stuff too, like CBD and
And
stock.
that is in the report, and we will get into that where we talk about, and we get into this is again very broad. This is a graphic, and when we get into the report, and this is where the conversation should go, right? Is when we get into the report, you will see where we say, this is your best strategy, hemp seed byproducts, as an initial application, and then other parts of the plan subsequently down the road, supporting the data supports the safety, right? I mean, that's what we can say as a group, both hemp industry, producers, processors, and regulators, right?
Yeah.
That's the area. That would be the common agreement that we look for, right? Not we want to go to stock, but we say let's start here with hemp. We think we're going to agree with that.
Right, but just to be clear, for the legislative recommendation, is that the recommendation right
there? That is the
there?
recommendation
Or
we've come up with.
Okay.
This is a stakeholder discussion. So if we are off base, if we need to synthesize that more, that's fine.
Or supplement it.
Yeah. Either way. It really is, and we do mean this in the draft. I mean, it is from the CDA perspective, articulating what we've heard into a kind of conscious thought and a plan is a little rough, right? And it's fun, but this is a rough draft, and it really is driven by the stakeholders, and it really should be driven by something. But to get something on paper that we can get all of the industries, all of the experts to agree. Again, back to kind of what we're talking about with consensus versus majority. Agree, this is the direction we should go. Right?
Huh? So that, and thanks, Hollis, that is the outline of all of the potential content. Better practice on these things is shorter is better. Make sure your executive summary is something that people can absorb. Make sure that the body of your document is short, and then you can have as much use you want in the appendix, but people tend not to read it if it's too thick. Okay? So tried to follow that. As we go through, and this is for the benefit of those of you on the phone, we've got this up on the wall as well. We're going to go conclusion by conclusion, and I'm going to document where we either have consensus and where we don't. If there's need for a minority opinion, who's going to write it, and where we have gaps, what are they, and who's going to fill them. Fair enough? All righty. So then for ease, we have taken the text directly out of the report. Versions dependent. We think we've done that. Directly out of the report, pasted it here so that people in the room can see it. Those of you on the phone, you should feel free to work off of your page 4 of the document that was mailed to you. Conclusion 1, focus on federal approval. So my proposal would be that we take a moment for you all to read this, and then we answer any questions, and then we assess whether we have consensus. Okay? And where we don't, it's probably going to be because we have need for a minority opinion, or we have a gap. Fair enough? All right, we'll take a moment and read that. All right. So based on what you've read, raise your hand if you believe that this is solid, you support this. Okay? Sort of. Okay. Wendy, what's missing?
Just some language tweaks.
Okay.
I'm not sure, in a lot of this report, there's statements that are very conclusive. For instance, individual states should not unilaterally approve hemp to be used in feed. I feel like the job of our team is to kind of state things a little broader. So something like, should individual states, unilaterally approve hemp, some of those adverse outcomes, could have the adverse outcomes of, importation, exportation issues. There's a couple of spots like that where I want legislators to, understand the reason why we're getting our point across that we want to get across, but without being, sort of dogmatic and determinative and presenting a precise conclusion. I don't know. I'll get to a couple of other points like that.
Yeah, but words do matter, right? Words do matter. And so what I just captured, for those of you on the phone, what I captured from Wendy's comment is we should probably use language that's a bit less conclusive, and in places where we don't, we need to back it up, right? So if we say it has adverse outcomes, there should be comma, such as.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough?
Yeah.
Okay. David Bush?
I just wanted to follow what Wendy said. I was saying concerning the last 2 sentences in the first paragraph. That's 2 strong statements. Perhaps we could say something like individual states should exercise caution in unilaterally approving hemp. But to suggest that they shouldn't do it at all when we begin the very same paragraph saying individual states can do this.
Yeah, but there's consequences to that. If a state did that and those cattlemen in that state try to put that meat on the market and USDA said that product can't go on the market because you're feeding them an unapproved ingredient, state does not supersede USD jurisdiction on what goes on the consumer market. So.
That's the perfect example.
Right.
Okay. So I captured that. Individual states could do this, but they should exercise caution for these reasons. Basically, make it clear that while they might be within their rights, the unintended consequences would be severe, and so this is the logical path forward. Yeah?
I mean, we have to be mindful of the fact that we did act unilaterally. That's why we're sitting here today. That's why we have a hemp industry and a marijuana industry in the state. This state acted unilaterally.
So
That still doesn't mean that the federal government can't, pull our weed off the market if we were to sell it in Maine. We can't do that. That's just like the cattle can't be fed hemp in Colorado and be sold in Jersey. It's not going to work.
That there are those potentially adverse outcomes. I completely agree.
Okay. Brian? Yeah. Okay. Very well. That might be vis-a-vis the cattle. That might be a relatively simple example. Okay. So at principle level, we're probably okay, but the details matter. Bill Hammer?
I'm not going to fall on the sword, but I like that individual states should not.
Yeah.
Because in the livestock industry today, we deal with a morass of regulations from state to state with a great number of things. And it gets very confusing for people, and it's in some cases an impediment. That's not elimination of trade, but so again, I'm not going to fall on the sword, but I like the clarity in that right there.
Yeah. What if we were to say, due to the scale of adverse consequences, the group recommends, or the group's conclusion was it is not in any state's best interest.
Right.
Okay. And again, I mean,
to independently regulate on their own. Exactly.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Can I just make it?
Yeah.
I think that is a great suggestion, Greg, and Wendy. Thank you so much for bringing this up. I would agree that when we go through this report, again, this isn't a research paper, and we don't want to be conclusive. This is again a conversation, articulating a conversation, so we can sort of what we should, and we've tried to clean up, and we can clean up more. That it phrased in a way, say the stakeholder group think this or suggest this. We can soften it that much, or soften it in that direction, but still be conclusive and to kind of important key points that we want people to know and consider, such as states shouldn't approve this on their own. Does that make sense?
Elizabeth?
I think until you have some approvals of one thing or another, I think we can still talk general because it's all still the same spot in the process.
Yeah.
I just want to put that up and get specific later.
Yeah.
As you move down.
So let me just address that sort of as an editor. One of the things that during the drafting of this we were careful to do was make sure that the executive summary was succinct and contained the complete list of what the recommendations are, so that someone, if they just read the bold print on page 3, it would say, go federal, but just 2 lines later, focus on the parts that have the highest potential.
Well, technically, they can approve their own individual feed on the animal side and the human side. They just haven't done it yet.
Some states have localized special industries, like in California, there's raisin meal. You don't really see that anywhere else, so the California Department of Agriculture has approved that ingredient for certain animals. You're not going to see that in other states. That's just something that's common in the statutes for each state, that they have that ability.
It's driven more often geographical availability of the ingredient.
Okay. So, any comments from the phone on this one?
Nothing that would change the wording that we're seeing
all, so no. Would the other state regulators agree that it should not be an individual standard?
So Veronica wanted to ask. So Veronica's whispering at me to ask the other state regulators on the phone.
Would they want to take an initiative to do their own thing or make it a universal?
Yeah. Are you generally supportive of pursuing the universal path versus state by state?
Yeah.
Montana is universal path.
Same here in Louisiana.
Okay.
I think we have New York.
They'll do the same in North Dakota.
Okay. All right. So let me ask again. In spirit, do we agree this is the right recommendation? Show of thumbs.
What's this?
So the conclusion, focus on federal approval. Okay? Because conclusion one, is that the right answer?
Yes.
I'm not sure you're getting at it because I don't like the last two sentences in paragraph 1. The rest of it is okay.
Okay.
So I'm still unclear what you mean when you're asking us to vote on this.
Okay. So thanks for that that clarity. We've identified some potential issues with the wording that supports the broad statement, but what we just heard from the folks on the phone and saw in the show of thumbs, that from a logic standpoint, the idea of focusing on federal approval, it looks like we have pretty close to consensus. Is there anybody who agrees with that idea or disagrees with the idea of focusing on the federal path?
I see nothing wrong with focusing on federal approval.
Okay.
My issue is discouraging states from also exercising leadership on certain issues, which may be contrary to what federal government is telling us. So it's fine to focus on federal approval. It's fine to go through this whole AFCO process, the food additive petition, get the seeds and seed byproducts approved. That's fine. Let's just not do that to the exclusion of what the state can exercise leadership on in other areas that we're not pursuing at the federal level.
Is that something that you'd like to put kind of into a minority opinion that says, hey, look, there's another thing for consideration down the road? Because if I'm understanding what you're saying, this makes good sense right now, but this is a first step on potentially a broader path. Excuse me, I'm asking David. Do you want to draft some language that could be included?
And we could certainly draft a minority opinion. I did actually have a kind of a point of order on that. Looking at the schedule here, there's nothing between now and December 6th when minority opinions are due. Is there a redraft of the report that we're going to see before December 6th so we can make a final decision on whether minority opinion is required?
So what we're looking for today are people who can say, for instance, I might ask, hey, Wendy, would you be helpful or would you be willing to help us refine the language in that first paragraph toward the bottom so that it is less restrictive, but also makes a clear point that this is the group's opinion? And Wendy shakes her head yes. So we have to do that. Your point of order, I think, is well made, and yes is the answer. We'll need to pump out a version that does its best to take advantage of your comments today. Okay? And if at that point you want to raise, that's okay, but the 6th will still be the deadline. Fair enough?
Yeah, but I guess where I'm coming from is, if this is softened enough to be a cautionary note, which is what Wendy was talking about, that's probably fine.
Okay.
If it's not softened enough to be simply a cautionary note and becomes a recommendation or a prohibition or something, then we'll have to write a minority opinion.
Gotcha. I like it. Very well. I saw somebody. Brent.
A question for David. Given the fact, I think, that we've narrowed our discussion down to seed and seed byproducts, which are basically going to be oil and the meal, if you consider that, is that language still okay with you? Because it's been my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, that everything that we're going to talk about from this point onward, based on how we've set up this study and this report, is very, very narrowly defined about those things that affect the production of.
So, I apologize. Before we leave number 5, anybody on? I don't like to look at myself.
Sorry.
Will you just really announce, Charlotte, Amy, you got your comments too. We appreciate that as well. Charlotte recommends a source, the FDA, FAQs, regarding
Okay.
THC, and Amy likes
152-436.
867
See, we need a
53. Oh no.
We need a little break.
Okay. Anybody on the phone want to stick on question 5? I did it. Come on.
I'm ready for a break.
Okay. Very well. Let's go to number 6 then.
Okay.
Give you a moment to read this. It's spread over 2 pages for those of you in the room.
There are sandwiches over here that are being eaten.
There are approximately 30 sandwiches that are not being eaten.
Wow.
Yeah.
Get 2. You look hungry, get 2.
We haven't even gone through it.
Okay. Time check. We got 15 minutes left, so we need to move relatively efficiently here. Number 6, sources of heartburn or recommendations for edit. Wendy.
A and E, so A in the last sentence, any research should be peer reviewed. We did have that discussion with, I believe Charlotte, did say some white papers would be allowed. Is that everybody's understanding?
Yeah.
I do remember that.
Yes, I do. That was an area where we wanted to get clarity.
It looks peer-reviewed review.
And most of it should be peer reviewed, but we've got white papers from the industry. Charlotte, will you comment on that just one last time?
Sorry, I was switching audio devices. Can you repeat it?
So the A, assemble and assess existing research materials. I'm pretty sure you commented that the last sentence there says any research should be peer reviewed. I believe you said white papers are acceptable as well.
Right. Things don't need to be peer reviewed. That can be a component, especially if you're pursuing GRAS as the regulatory standard. White papers are an excellent way to compile the existing information about a substance. So peer-reviewed literature is one source. Compiling that into a white paper is probably better because you're taking the existing information and developing a narrative about what that information tells you. So it's kind of a continuum. And then certainly, I think we talked about the fact that new and novel studies can also be useful. Studies designed specifically to support an approval, which would be proprietary data that would be submitted, the study report, the raw data, the whole thing as part of a petition. So there's kind of a continuum of information that can be useful for supporting the approval of a petition.
Okay. So do we handle that by adding sentences, or do we handle it by striking that sentence?
Adding to the sentence. But
Okay. So I tried to capture what Charlotte just said.
any research used.
Yep.
We have notes. We know to focus on it.
Good. Got it. Other suggestions, Wendy?
One last thing that execute a targeted position, the E, the first sentence of targeted FAP should focus on hemp seeds, cake, and oil separately. We can decide whether those would be separate submissions or not. Bill, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I had to unmute myself. yeah, you know, depending, not quite to that step yet, but could have data more to, you know, current pathway, but I think in meeting with FDA ahead of time, as recommended, that could be discussed, you know, with the agency before submission or while that's in process. So it might be possible, but I think that's a point that should be discussed this year.
Hey, this is Charlotte.
Yep.
I would just go ahead and plan on those being separate petitions. You can address multiple species for one substance in one petition, but once you start parsing out into different ingredients, if you will, those are different food additives and would need to be different petitions.
So Charlotte.
So the oil would be one, the meal would be one, and I guess if you're going for the whole hemp seed as well, that would be a third.
So Charlotte, both of those are byproducts of the grain, right? So the hemp seed oil
Right.
and then the cake. So regardless, that they need to be separate, even byproducts.
Yeah.
That's how we do soybeans.
Yeah.
We do
Okay.
canola.
Okay.
To which Wendy says, bummer.
Yeah, that's a big bummer.
Right, okay, so I'm just saying, this is talking about 3 instead of like, 6
Right. Wendy, hey, Veronica, and
Yeah.
Wendy, this will look up. So there may be parts of the submission that would be leverageable. So from, you know, your perspective in how do you get funding and is each individual petition. So the first one's always the most expensive, right? The others may be, some data may be leverageable in that, okay?
Okay.
Which I think.
Absolutely. That's a good point, Bill.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah, giving us help over here.
Richard?
Richard, Babco. Charlotte, if they want to do an intended use with omega-3, is it advisable to even split the oil one into that and just a nutritional oil application?
So fortifying the edible human food products.
Right.
That what you, yeah, so that's another one that triggers a food additive petition. So we're good since that's already the plan. But anytime the intent is to modify the resultant human food because of any potential exposure questions, we typically request a food additive. So if that's the intended use, that's fine. Since you're planning on going for a food additive.
So my thought, Charlotte, though, is because you have to bring the 610 side in for the omega-3s, they might want to do 2 different ones.
I think we're gonna probably do an update at some point on what the industry is going after and what the next step for us to do, because it's up to the industry to do like the submission side, which there needs to be still more discussions with the regulatory and like a organization that can help us actually get through the process. So hopefully there will be.
I'm just trying to think of ways that
Yeah.
the easiest path through
Love the way you think.
market, and then
Yep.
once you engage the human side, it's a different piece.
Yep.
But that's a big step though, it's still needing to identify which products, which species, what intended uses, there's still a lot of those steps that I think will probably still need to be determined.
Well, most steps in the research already.
Okay. Other thoughts on 6? Anybody on the phone have a thought on 6?
This is Kelsey. I think that as many separate things should be submitted just all at the same time, just because some of the literature is leverageable when you're submitting this mechanism, just under the recognition that ASCO has 72 different definitions for corn. I think as many as need to be done all at once is better.
Other thoughts or comments on 6? Very well. So then my question is, anybody have heartburn? Doesn't look like it, but anybody on the phone feel like a minority opinion is necessary? Very well. So let's then go to the legislative recommendation. Slide 18, if you're on that one. It's, so that showed up here. I'll give you a minute to read it. All right, what comments do we have on this one?
This is Terry, and this is just an observation. I don't have an opinion to say that I'm necessarily opposed to this by any means. Just an observation that, to my knowledge, the legislature rarely provides assistance to what private companies should be doing on their own. I can't really recall them seeking federal approval for a retail good ever. They do things that are generally helpful across segments like research on water, but they don't necessarily say if you're wanting to open a bottling plant and you need to understand what sort of quality of water you need, they'll conduct the research and the approval process to do that. So it's just an observation that maybe require a bit of a different angle at what if you really want the legislature to do something, you probably ought to ask them to do something they're somewhat willing to do, and we can just pop that out there for conversation. Colorado's cash strapped as it is, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond to being asked to seek approval or fund. Maybe they'll do some stuff on research, though. I don't know.
This is Hollis. Thank you, Terry. I think that's good insight. Because we have a charge of what are the legislative recommendations can be made, and we had that discussion. Look, we're not necessarily specifically asking for money. It's more of a general support, meaning of support of what they can do on these two levels, which is support additional research that we've kind of lined out that we needed. That's kind of step maybe 1A or 1 area, and 1B is can you support not necessarily through legislation or through financing, but in general support any initiatives from industry going forward. But I think Terry makes an excellent observation. We're just trying to say something here, kind of button this up as far as the legislator asks, we really say. I think we can synthesize this out a little bit better.
David?
Yeah, just one wording thing. At the end of the second line, there's that word byproducts. Whole hemp seeds are not byproducts, it's just hemp. So I think at least we need to take out the by dash. We could say hemp, we could say hemp and hemp products, we could say hemp products, any one of those would be okay. Just byproducts doesn't make sense.
Would that be throughout the whole report?
Well, what do you mean?
Does it say byproducts elsewhere?
Yeah, it does, but that says potential of hemp byproducts.
Like a quiz, huh? Yeah.
We're talking about hemp seed and hemp seed byproducts?
Yeah, just because some stuff is not a byproduct, it's a product or it is just a natural thing. And byproduct makes it sound like it's a residue of something. We're talking about a little bit more than a residue.
Well, I think in a lot of the sections we are specifically talking about the byproducts of the seed, but here this could be just hemp products.
Yeah,
we're talking about supporting research on a broader scale than just the seeds.
But I think we agree that we want Colorado legislators and all the other state legislators to support the efforts of industrial hemp regarding research and development. with all parts of the hemp plant, including its byproducts. I mean, is that not what we would all agree upon? That we want the legislators in each state to support the ongoing efforts of the hemp industry regarding research and development. We just want them to support this, whether that's a bill, whether that's getting funding through a bill through the university, like Salazar tried to do last year.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure what you're saying. I mean, I agree with everything else.
Yeah,
Just
but I'm
the
saying,
word byproducts is kind of strange.
yeah, I'm saying
That's all
hemp
I
and its byproducts.
I think it was just hemp and hemp products.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, because I think byproduct, at the point, I mean, it almost makes it seem as though it's the unintended thing that you're going to.
Well, but actually, that's
in some
what it
cases
is.
that's
You
true.
know, you have in the feed world, you have primary products and then you have byproducts, and that actually is a pretty important standard in the naming of some ingredients. And you know, you have a primary purpose for a process, and anything that's not that primary product is a byproduct, and a lot of those have uses in feed.
So I think what we'll do is, I mean, the report is written that it is, we say hemp and byproducts. We want to recognize the whole seed,
right.
that feedback, as well as the byproduct of that seed.
Yeah.
In addendum C, we will have terms which we
Yes.
can clear out and we'll make it clear. Hemp seed byproducts, which is your cage and your oil. Now, there are a few spots, particularly maybe here, there are a few spots when we're talking more general, where we can just say hemp.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But for the most part, we will see throughout this report it's hemp byproduct, hemp seed, and hemp seed byproducts, meaning the two, because of different applications.
Mm-hmm.
Here also, I think to Dr. Ryan's point, you know, we're focusing from broad to narrow with the legislative recommendation that's focused on hemp seed. Maybe the legislative recommendation.
So that strikes me to be a significant difference in what you said
Well,
earlier.
what I'm saying is that we want the legislators to come out of this with two things. One, they need to continue supporting us in the industry and our efforts regarding all parts of the hemp plant. In this particular case, through this work group, we've done focused on hemp seed
Okay.
and its byproducts. But I want the state legislator to support us, the industry, period. Just generally.
And I get that.
Yeah, yeah.
I would think too, because we're looking for consensus, and the report is narrowing the focus of the report to hemp seed as the approval initiative.
Okay, right.
Then the recommendation that all
Okay.
of the stakeholders should strive for consensus should be limited to what we're saying.
And the charge
Right.
was
I
all
understand.
related to the feasibility of the feed, and any suggested legislation would be related to the feasibility of hemp and feed.
Well, and that's
So-
specifically asking about the hemp seed byproducts, that recommendation. So I see what you're saying, Hollis, too. So
Okay. Sounds like that makes pretty good logical sense. Very well. Okay, so that is the sum total of the report. For those of you on online, we've captured your comments. We have those electronically. In the room, I've got what turns out to be primarily just gaps in owners. So the department will summarize this and be working with you individuals to help close some of those gaps. I think in a number of places we've already done that. We'll work to incorporate the language suggestions that you had. Easy ones first, and in some other cases we're going to have to, rewrite paragraphs, or so we're going to reorder the conclusions. Those are the main things, and then we'll pump that out. At that time, we'd ask you for the scrutinous read, and as you do, if you think that we need a footnote, some sort of caveat, or even a minority opinion, a citation, something that makes this report more comprehensive, more intelligible, then we would ask you to identify by replying to that email.
What is your expectation of when it could be circulating around another draft? Go back to the
Well, this is his point earlier. David's
When
point
we
earlier
said
was
that
that left
edits
no
are being
time.
done. Right. But we need something to look at to do that, so unless I'm misinterpreting that timeline.
So that's almost 3 weeks between now and the deadline for the minority opinions.
And what are we doing about the appendix? Are we supposed to give comments on the appendix part of it, or
Well,
what's
let's go one at a time. Okay. So Hollis, what's the when can we commit to getting a version out for folks to read? End of the month. Okay. Provide you another week. Okay. Thanks. And then Veronica raises a good point. In the appendix right now, we have a very high-level summary of the discussion. And Hollis, what is your suggestion or expectation on those edits?
So the request is to have receive edits from stakeholders, people who want to volunteer to help with the editing of that.
Are we editing the appendix section?
In the appendix as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Veronica, are you interested?
Yeah.
Okay. Other volunteers to help with the editing of the appendix, and this is important because we want to make sure that the appendix makes it obvious why the group said what it said, and that it contains some of the more significant discussions, kind of to the point earlier around we spent quite a bit of time on something. We want to make sure that we don't have to relearn that later.
Dr. Ryan.
Okay. Dr. Ryan, I saw Wendy wave her hand. Thank you. Others?
I can help with subgroup 3 from appendix B.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Brent. Anybody on the phone? Any volunteers for editing the appendix? Okay.
Is that just a summary of all the discussions?
Yeah. It's a very high-level summary.
I got some comments on that.
Yeah, I have a lot
Thank
of
you,
comments
David.
on those.
We are, and we have gotten advanced edits from
Okay. Thanks, Charlotte, for sending those along. Very well then. I think we've accomplished the work of the day. My question to you all is: are there any other items that we need the group's opinion on, or are we safe to adjourn?
I just want to say thank you, Bill and Charlotte, and all the other regulatory bodies that are on the phone and participating in this meeting. Just super, super grateful from the hemp industry side. Thank you.
All right. Well, in that case, thank you all, and we'll get together with you on the 15th. Oh, I'm sorry, on the 12th of December. Talk to you soon.